Hello and welcome to Next Gen Console Watch, our show here at IGN covering all the biggest news, rumors, and releases in the world of the Xbox Series and PlayStation 5. I'm your host for this week, Jonathan Dornbush, filling in for Damon Hatfield, who is a little bit busy with things known as E3 in the summer of gaming, but we've got a great show for you nonetheless. I'm joined, as always, by Ryan McCaffrey, the host of Podcast Unlocked.
Good to see you, Jonathan.
And we're also joined this week by special guest Mike Fitzgerald, the director of core technology at Insomniac Games.
Happy to be here.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us, of course, to talk about Ratchet Clank Rift Apart, which is coming out today as the show airs. Congratulations to you and the team on the launch.
Thank you so much.
We're very excited to talk to you about it. I, of course, reviewed it on IGN, and Ryan has been playing it, and Spoilers has been loving it as well. So we're really
so good.
We're really excited to jump in and talk to you a little bit about the game. And I wanted to sort of start off on a note of, this is obviously not the first game in even a short window that Insomniac has made for the PlayStation 5 with Spider-Man Miles Morales and the Spider-Man remastered version, but this is the first PS5 exclusive. And I was sort of wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about, just in general, obviously broad strokes, because I could understand it could get really into detail, but sort of how developing for the PS5 has differed a little bit for things on the PS4, and what's changed a little bit, what's been smoothed out with the new technology.
Well, the extra 6 months has given us a lot of time, even in that range, to really focus on what we can double down on from a technical standpoint and how to leverage it better. I think it was. There's a lot of work there to support, both consoles at once, make sure you're delivering the same awesome experience on both of them. And even just making a game in general can be a lot of work and a lot of time. So it was nice to take a step back after shipping the launch titles and see what we could drill down on. Specifically, we, worked extra hard to leverage the SSD and a lot of the IO technology there to deliver something unique and spectacular for this game.
Well, kind of on that note, Mike, I'm curious if the PS5 itself kind of changed the development pipeline at all. Like it's like you got to think about the 3D audio and the aforementioned SSD. So does that sort of fundamentally change the approach to the technical design of the game?
It's actually been a really great console to develop for. The platform teams did an awesome job taking the development kit from the PlayStation 4, bringing a lot of that process forward to the PlayStation 5. And it was really easy to get up and get going. And, just having some of that extra CPU power and GPU power, it's easy to leverage. And then getting to, it makes it easy to then spend a lot of time focusing on the things that make your game special, as opposed to just getting it up and working.
And it feels like, in particular, the Ratchet and Clank franchise, as someone who's been playing it since the PS2 days, it feels really tailor-made to some of the added bells and whistles and the benefits of the PS5, like Ryan was mentioning, 3D audio, but also the DualSense. I was sort of wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about the team's approach to those two aspects specifically, because I can imagine you want to bring these wacky weapons that are so synonymous with Ratchet and Clank to life, but you also want to make sure the feedback that players are getting is engaging, but it's like a new spectrum that you're able to offer with this, the DualSense.
Yeah, I'd say as soon as we heard, what the team was trying to deliver with the controller, we knew that it would be absolutely perfect for Ratchet and for all the different weapons, and really getting to do some creative experiences there. And honestly, it added another factor to take in as you're working on that 20 weapons in the game. What do they all do? They need to have these gameplay effects. They also need to sound and look different. Okay, they also need to feel different too and use different parts of the controller. But it was a really fun process for the team to, think of creative ideas and things to do differently and how to make them feel unique. So it definitely was one where as soon as we heard about the controller, we were excited to apply it to everything in this game.
Do you remember what the first weapon you guys prototyped up on DualSense was to really kind of test out what it could look like in the game and feel like?
I don't remember exactly. I know that topiary sprinkler weapon is one of the first ones we showed, because it's one of the first ones that people were so excited about the idea of. And there's so many different things happening with that weapon. You fire it out, it lands, it sprouts things, it shoots water, and working on getting all those feelings coming through the controller was a blast for the team.
How about on the level design side of the technical aspect of it, particularly? I mean, obviously, the going into the PS5, it was all about SSD was going to be this huge feature that was going to come as close to eliminating loading times as possible, and you guys pretty much nailed that with Rift Apart. I mean, Jonathan's played the whole thing. I'm halfway or so through. I mean, does that SSD sort of change the team's approach to either crafting the planets or integrating cinematics into the game at all?
It's actually been, it's interesting. You think about, okay, I have an SSD in this console. I know it's going to be faster than a spinning hard drive was. Maybe it'll be like our PCs, and we know how SSDs are faster. But there's all this other tech surrounding it to really integrate it in the rest of the hardware that lets it do more. And so, as working on this game, it was this constant process of surprising ourselves with how much more we can get out of it, right? So you can try and load all the same files. Okay, they come back to you sooner. But we also have the ability to tell it to load tens of thousands of files, and it figures out when, like, how to get them most efficiently and send them to us. Okay, that made our things load twice as fast. Just finding this, that. Hey, I think we can load a level in 2 seconds. I think we can load a level in 1 second. I think we can do it in a half a second. And not only from a gameplay perspective, but as you mentioned, from a cinematic perspective, it lets us do things like camera cuts to new, you can do a camera cut to a new place in a game because you'd need 3 seconds to load what's over there unless you worked, tirelessly to make this tiny little perfectly framed thing you could keep loaded. And now we can just sort of, that's a tool in our tool belt. Or those screen wipes that we have there are something, it would have been really hard to do as you're traveling from planet to planet in this game. We can do these sort of Star Wars style wipes across the screen. That it's something cinematic that it took our animators and teams a while to remember. Oh yeah, I don't have all these limitations I used to have. I usually have when making games. There's things I can do if I were making movies.
Well, and yeah, it's those wipes in particular when you're going from one to the other and you're switching between Ratchet and Rivet. And in my head, when the first time it happened, I was like, oh, it'll be a second or two, kind of like we'll see a vista and it'll maybe pause for a little bit, but it gets right back into the action and right into these worlds. And they're also, I think, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but some of these certainly feel like the biggest worlds that I can remember playing in a Ratchet and Clank game. Was the size and the scope? Because we also, it seems like battles are bigger than ever, and there's more going on in all of the battles. Was all of that increase in scope sort of tied to what the PS5 was able to let the team do in terms of adding more, but making sure it was valuable on screen at any given time?
We always knew we could do more. And I think one thing to remember is we start working on these games before we have the hardware, before we have the engine running on the hardware. We don't know exactly how it's going to perform or what we're going to be able to do. And for this one, it was sort of like, well, let's aim high. Let's make, more detailed models than we'd ever make, more detailed textures than we'd ever make, design some crazy encounters, and sort of challenged ourselves to meet that. So it's been exciting to take some things like that for the franchise in a bit further of direction and push it further than it could go before.
Well, kind of on that note, Mike, I'm curious, games every generation have always gotten better looking as the generation goes on. Developers get a better feel for the hardware, the SDK and tool sets mature. How much untapped hardware potential do you think is still there for future Ratchet games?
There's so much. I look at even, what we've done with the SSD and loading in this game just feels like the tip of the iceberg. We can get a lot more out of that hardware that I'm excited about. From a rendering potential, we as a studio have used ray tracing for reflections and tried to, lean into some of that ability quite a bit. And I think there's a lot farther we can take that as well. So it's going to be a fun, however many years of leveraging this hardware and trying to do some more spectacular things with that.
Yeah, is speaking to the sort of added visual benefits as is present on Ryan's screen, and also a lot of my playtime after I beat the game. I've sort of been obsessed with photo mode, because not only do you get to see so much of the incredible detail that the team has put into it, but even as you were mentioning things like ray tracing, like the reflections of nefarious city that I can see in Ratchet's eye or on a helmet.
This is literally just my game right now. That's all this is. This is just photo mode. This isn't a screenshot. This is my actual, this is where I left off in the game right now. I love it.
And it's this incredible level of detail that I was especially curious about. Obviously, the titular rifts to discuss just a little bit about. You're talking about the ability to load a planet or load a level from one to the other as we're going through cinematics. But of course, that happens with the rifts as well. Was integrating that sort of experience of that seamless loading a really big challenge for the gameplay side of it? Because I love the mini boss battles or the boss battles where you're on a planet and then you end up somewhere else in the midst of the fight.
Yeah, there were a lot of really odd challenges that came up with that. I'm trying to think of a good example. So we model those things as they're two different worlds, and the character falls right through it and needs to feel like they're in one contiguous space the whole time. But at some point the game is saying, you're not here anymore. Now you're over, thousands of meters away or arbitrarily far away in world space for the characters. And that means, if you just, and you're also moving the camera, or sometimes the camera is on one side of the portal, the character's on the other. Technically, they're thousands of meters away in the game world, but they need to look like they're up close. And maintaining that, making sure that moment where you move through, where your camera moves through, is seamless. The motion blur stays working. The depth of field all looks perfect through those areas. We're making, you're going from a light area to a dark area, and there's no jarring there, no jarring transition there. Took a ton of work for the gameplay teams, and the technical teams.
Mike, which came first, the rifts or the SSD? Like, did you guys get the sort of paper top level PS5 spec and like, hey, we're going to do this SSD thing with this incredible IO, and then build the Rift stuff around that? Or did the Rift aspect of design come in later after it became evident what the PS5 was going to be capable of?
Our creative team, I believe, got a bit of a heads up on some of the features of the console, just to think about how we could leverage them. And I think it dovetailed nicely with, we want to introduce this franchise to new players, so it's great to have some new characters and new introductions for people. And that idea of, okay, fast loading, well, different dimensions and planets and areas, and these things just sort of fell together really, really nicely. So from the conception of the project, earlier in the project, the riffs and the hopping from world to world was definitely part of it.
Yeah, what I really love, especially as an old-time Ratchet fan, is seeing the blend of old and new, not just the characters and the storytelling, but also the evolution of Insomniac as a whole. Can you speak at all of whether it was technology of, the team has a few open-world games under their belt now, especially with the Spider-Man games. Did that thought process, or did lessons learned from the Spider-Man games affect Rift Apart in any major way that you can speak to?
Yeah, especially on the engine and tools team, we try and make sure we're building up technology for one game and bringing it forward to the next one and the next one. And that's what gives us, the ability to do better and better things each time and think in new directions. So some of the worlds in this game, they're big because we can use, an open world style streaming and loading system. We can add more detail in places because we don't always need to have it around. And then I would say too, from a cinematic direction and storytelling standpoint, we really pushed ourselves as the studio on the two Spider-Man titles, and I think you see that come to this game as well.
Well, Mike, I mean, on that note, what you're saying is, I'm going to translate for you, for the audience here, is that there's nothing stopping you from now doing an Into the Spiderverse Spider-Man game with this, where we can just hop between Spider-Verses. Right?
Well, let me get my notepad over here.
Yeah, let's get the product roadmap out. But theoretically, you could apply this to Spider-Man or anything else you guys want to do.
Well, I think, you know, I've heard some people say that. I think we're going to apply this tech in some ways that we haven't even thought about yet, right? There's some really cool technical underpinnings to it that don't only involve I opened a hole and I walked through the hole and I'm in a different place. Um, you know, and so those camera wipes are one, being able to do camera cuts to new areas in games to deliver some of the same cinematic techniques. You can imagine intercutting between two different sides of a city or a different place. So whatever we do next, I think we'll get to leverage some of this in a really new, cool way that people aren't expecting.
And I think Rift Apart was absolutely full of those experiences as well. And so I'm so excited to see what the future holds for future Insomniac games, but with this one in particular, for people to finally get their hands on it and dive into the incredible experience that you've all put together. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate your time, and congratulations to you and the team on the launch of Rift Apart.
Thank you so much. And it's been awesome to have you guys play it. And we're so excited for players to play it as well.
Before we go, of course, we have our poll results for you this week. Last week's poll was, which E3 conference are you most excited for? Ubisoft, EA's, Devolver's, or Microsoft's? And by a wide margin, Microsoft won with 69.1% of the poll, nice. Trailing behind there. Thank you, Ryan. Ubisoft trailing behind at 15.6%, followed by EA and then Devolver. Ryan, obviously, this is our last show before. We'll be covering the Microsoft conference next week and everything that was announced there and elsewhere. But it's no surprise to me. They have so much potential right now. I'm not surprised the audience is that excited. What about you?
That's a good way to put it. I mean, Ubisoft has already telegraphed a lot of what they're going to show. I'm sure they'll still have surprises, but they've said, hey, we're going to have more Far Cry 6, and we'll have Rainbow Six, the newly renamed Rainbow Six Extraction. Whereas Microsoft, you're right, there's a lot of mystery there. It's like, okay, yeah, Halo, we'll assume that much, but will Starfield be shown? Will other Bethesda stuff be shown? What about some of Microsoft's new studios that we haven't heard from, like inXile and Compulsion? So yeah, there's still a lot left that's not on the table that hopefully we'll get to see from Microsoft this weekend. And yeah, we'll join us. The Unlocked crew is going to be live starting at 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 12:30 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, June 13th. So we'll have our pre-show where we're going to talk about a lot more of this, of what we think we're going to see, what we hope to see. And then we'll roll right into the conference. Just stay right there and watch. And then we'll go, as soon as it ends, we come right out and we'll talk through and analyze everything we just saw.
I just personally hope they find a way to get Keanu to show up again. Cyberpunk related or not, he's just a great addition to any show. But yes, they've been doing a fantastic string of conferences the last few years, and I'm very excited to watch that, as well as all of the E3 showcases and much more going on. So please stay tuned to IGN for all of our Summer of Gaming coverage. We have a ton of reveals, breakdowns, conference coverage, and so much more to bring to you over the coming days. But of course, we'll have a poll for you this week as well, with Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart being one of the longest running PlayStation franchises getting new additions right now. We want to know which long running PlayStation franchise, maybe some of the mascots that were teased as part of a Rift Apart tie-in on Twitter recently, if you maybe have seen that. Which franchise would you like to see return on the PlayStation 5 next? Be sure to vote in our poll on IGN.com, and we'll have the results for you next week, along with all of the coverage of the amazing stuff happening over the next few days. But Ryan, thank you so much for joining me for this week.
Always.
And thank you to everyone out there watching Next Gen Console Watch every week. And thank you to our guest, Mike Fitzgerald, of course, for joining us again as well this week. Remember, Next Gen Console Watch is live every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific on IGN and YouTube. So be sure to tune in. But thank you so much for watching.